Hello everyone. Welcome, welcome. It is Pink Sheep and Friends Friday. I am so sorry that I am a little bit late. It was one of those moments where I was working on some stuff for Etsy and all that stuff and orders, and I just got sucked in and I was like, oh my gosh, it's 12:02. So, hello everyone. I was actually going to do my hair today, and obviously that fell through too since I was not paying attention to the time. But thank you guys for joining me. I am trying to update my, oh, there we go. Okay. Oh, okay. There we go. Getting all my settings right. I am super, super excited today to bring on a very special guest. This is one of those times when, you go to reach out to someone and you're like, I don't even know if this person is going to answer me or want to be a part of the videos, but I am so, so excited that they did. So let's go ahead and bring on, oh, there we go. Oh, and they have already requested to be in the video. Make it so easy for me. Here we go. It's fun. There we go. Hello.
Hi. Oh, I need to get my shot. Like, I feel like my head was being cut off.
And always, I feel like Instagram, they get so little.
Yeah, they do. I was like, oh, wow. I'm like,
really out, move up, move down, move around.
Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Okay.
I hear you just fine. Yes, and I'm so sorry. I seriously, I got sucked into Etsy, and I look at the phone and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's 12:02 and my tripod isn't even set up, and I'm like throwing things together.
Oh my goodness, no worries at all. I went out to a coffee shop to do some co-working this morning, and
Nice.
I love where I live here downtown, and so many cute coffee shops, and as the weather starts to warm up, you can just go outside and work. And
yes.
I was like, oh wow, it was just 8 o'clock. Like, how is it almost noon already? So
yes.
No worries at all. I totally get it.
And remind me where you're located right
now. I am here in downtown Chicago. So Chicago, Illinois.
Okay.
Yeah, but I've lived in the Midwest for many years now. So I like to get away and say that I'm a Chicagoan when I can.
Gotcha. That's awesome. Well, for anyone who does not know who you are, if you wouldn't mind doing just a quick little intro of who you are and what you do.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Jewell. I am sort of twofold here in the community and industry. I'm a designer. My knitwear shop and business and brand is called North Knits. So I design really simple designs that are primarily knit, but also crochet for people who love to knit. Yes. And I primarily do accessories and garment patterns, and I've been doing that for quite a while. I picked the craft up in college, and in 2016 with some friends, which this is just so lovely, and I heard you being so genuine, saying you weren't sure if I was wanting to do it, but anything where people can be involved as friends, like, I'm totally down for, and all the way of an idea to be able to hang out with people that I knew online, to be able to do that in an offline, really cool environment in a cool city. So
yeah,
I am the founder of OML, and I'm also the knitwear designer of North Knits. So hello, everyone, new friends, old friends. Hey.
Yes. Well, and I feel like Our Maker Life is one of those accounts where I think unless you really look, it's kind of hard to tell. And sometimes if someone just stumbles upon the account, like, who started this account, what really is it? Obviously it's a community, but I had no idea that you started it as a way to actually hang out in person. And I would love to hear a little bit more about that idea and what that progression looked like for you.
Yeah. That's a great question, and I received that wholeheartedly as well. It's like when you first come to our account, which is primarily a repost account, you are kind of like, well, Well, is this just a repost account? Are there people behind this? Is
Who's
it a bot? Like, what is
reposting?
it? And so for many, many years, our tagline for OML was for makers by makers. But we all were pretty bashful. So 5 of us who were also fiber artists, either knit or crochet or a combination of, and we're running our own pattern design businesses, or maybe we had Etsy shops, because I started out on Etsy. A few of us were just pretty much knitting enthusiasts and hobbyists. And so we all had these varied backgrounds, where we lived, where we were from, our belief systems, but we had this one really commonality, and that was fiber. Even our stories for how we got involved in knitting and crochet were all varied. But I thought, like, wow, how cool is that, you know, we have this common thread. And that so many people also, like thousands and hundreds of thousands of people online did as well. And so it's like, this is really, really cool that in this way we're more alike than we are different. And so, you know, just my background, I went to college and I lived in a social community. I lived in a residential college. And so the whole point of where I lived was to find different things, whether that be on the academia side or on the creative artistic side, to find ways to connect with your fellow residents as a way to grow your community and just become better and stronger about yourself. Like, it was really immersed in this micro hub within the overall campus college at USC, so that you could go out into the larger you know, area of campus and be a more prepared, better acclimated student if you weren't an athlete or something like that, where those very specific micro hubs are created. So, you know, full circle, I had been out of college for years and had gone on to graduate school, and it was my reason for moving here to Chicago. The graduate school that I went to, Roosevelt, which was started by Eleanor and Theodore Roosevelt, their main mission for the university was, again, you're immersed right downtown in this huge city of 3 million in Chicago, but it was all about having social, and specifically social justice, commonality between the students. And so my just enthusiasm for that got sparked again when I went to graduate school, and I was like, I think this is just life, and I think it can be adapted to any art or belief system that we have. And so when I get immersed in the Etsy world, I'm sort of seeing that in the Ravelry world, and I'm seeing that, and then on Instagram, and I was like, hey, like, the big thing that I've learned in my life is that you can have all of these things online and through technology, and you can really lean into that, right? But you gotta have that in person. Like, that is just like, that's your secret sauce. That's like just a chef's kiss. And it really just like amplifies everything else around that. And so I was very nervous to sort of pitch that idea to people who like didn't know me. It was like, yeah, we're friends, but like only in DM, bro. So I was really like nervous to pitch that idea and say, basically, like, is there some way that we can formulate where, even though we're from all different areas of the world, can we create something where we're able to meet up in a common space? And what does that look like? And how often is that? And do our Instagram followers want that? Do they want to share that with their communities? And so I was really just like going for it. I inherently believed, I was like, if we can do it, it will work. But I just don't know. But also, you know, there are retreats and networking conferences and stuff like that, obviously in our community as well. So I was like, yeah, I think it'll work. So yeah, that's really where it grew. And so you know, the 5 of us, we just brainstormed that. We just leaned into that idea, and ultimately it came down to, let's just ask our communities. Let's just create an online, you know, community here. Like, that is still important. And so that's why we started our Maker Life. But we said, hey, you know, we want to share you all. We were very bashful about showing our faces or trying to say, hey, this is what we started. We wanted it to be like, we want you there at the offline events, and until we figure out how that looks like, we just want to showcase you here. We don't want to charge you anything for it. Like, this is just a free space for us to share you. And eventually, as but you know, yeah, I know, right? Like, your phone's always going off. But you know, we just asked people, and they chose a city. And so that I thought was just like really, really cool that we can give power to, you can give power to your audience and give power to your community, especially if it's something that you're not exactly sure about. So, long story short, we asked our followers, and our first event, the city that was chosen was downtown Manhattan, New York City. And we were like, oh my God, I'm not
Yeah.
from New York. I've only been to New York one time. The other two people who started were in Canada, and I was like, I've made a huge mistake. Because also, like, putting together an event, none of us really had a strong or anything of like an event planning background. So there was that too.
Yeah.
And I sort of had a bit of naivete looking at other things that were happening even in our very niche industry, thinking like, how hard can it be?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, oh no, it is very difficult. It is quite difficult. So we were like, I hope people come.
Yeah.
But yeah, we ended up having a beautiful event of about 50 makers in downtown Manhattan. And again, our thing has always just been about talking to our audience and trying to figure out what it is that they want, because at the end of the day, that's what OML is. It is the culmination of us. It's the whole of the different, it's the sum of all of us coming together. And so we were very intentional about not wanting to make decisions that we thought were big and important that holistically make up OML without gauging our audiences. So we asked people at the event, well, if we did this again, you guys seem to love it. We had really great speakers and influencers there, and big brands there. And so we said, hey, if we did this again, what it ended up being was a summer annual event. And so, it was just a 1-day, 8-hour event. And we said, if we did it again next year, same time, different place, or same place, like, what would you want that to look like? And people were like, you can have it anywhere, but next time more people, more people to know about this. And so it sort of just grew from there, where we've ended up having meetups again in Manhattan, and then Toronto, Canada. The following year we had it here in Chicago, Illinois, and then in Calgary, Canada. And then our last year meetup, which was a rollover from 2020, was in Portland, Oregon. And this year it will be in Denver, Colorado. So just going out all over the world, like, hey, let's hang out. And it's
so I would love to hear a little bit more too. I've had a lot of requests to talk specifically on the subject of discovering new makers, having that community, like reaching out to people. And that's one of the reasons why I love starting Pink Sheep and Friends, is because it gave me a reason to reach out to people who it doesn't matter how many followers you have, you're always going to have people where you're like, I don't know if that person is going to have time to talk to me. Like, what if, it's just little old me, like people have that kind of concept with social media of like, there is kind of that, if it's not a fear, it's just a reason to not communicate and like reach out and make friends and like slide up into people's DMs,
Absolutely.
And the fact that like you created these friendships with people online, and then were able to take that and create something that was happening in real life. What did that look like for you? How did you make those connections in the first place? With the people that you created OML with, and how did y'all continue to foster that community to create something so real?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it really kind of came out of I call it like just this perfect storm of just connection that was happening very authentically on Instagram. So one of the co-founders, Kelly of Knitbrooks, she's still immersed in the community. She makes really fiber tools these days, so crochet hooks.
Amazing crochet hooks.
Yeah, she makes these beautiful, crochet hooks. In the forest of Nova Scotia. I'm like, Kelly, can you get any more magical? But I always saw her magic. I always saw her magic because she would talk about this dream and vision and idea for a while. And so I always, thought it was something really beautiful and tangible that she could create. But Kelly is also I totally
Yep.
fangirled for real. And you know, yeah, we would just have connection on DM. I would just, I mean, I think stories were around when we started OML, maybe not far after, but I was just always commenting on her page and just fangirling out. And then I noticed she would do the same on mine. Kathleen, who started Country Pine Designs, it was the same thing. Kathleen and I we just connected because we would talk on each other's pages. And then I think maybe like Kathleen or Allison, like they followed Nathan of Loopin' Threads. And Nathan really didn't show his face. We just thought like, wow, he has really, really cool knitwear designs and models and photography and sort of that combination. And yeah, it just started out with me like just fostering those relationships, I would say very organically. But really it was mostly, I would say, really with Kelly. And then when I put it out there, I basically like DM, I think it still has this ability of where you can just add maybe like 20 people to a DM thread. And so I was like, hey, y'all, this is my idea. If anybody's interested. I was just so afraid. I was like, let me just preface, I'm not trying to spam people. Like, I don't know. If you say no, like totally fine. But if you're interested, and it was really me thinking like, not even really thinking it all the way through, but just going with what I inherently felt was just like, I don't know, not logical. I'm reading this really great book right now called Alchemy, which really talks about that, like not being afraid, like you said, of if it doesn't make sense logistically, because that's not really where your alchemy is. It's really in the non-logical sort of craziness of it all and you not having it all figured out. And that's just been my history through academia, through my, you know, career life, through my personal life. I just go with if it kind of feels good, and we'll see.
Yeah.
So I went ahead and I was like, I'm just gonna shoot my shot. Like, I'm pretty sure everyone will say no because I don't really know you guys. But I was floored when people were like, yes, I'd want to do this. And then people were like, I'll help you plan it. And, you know, it just sort of came out of that. And then people were like, I'm going to start another thread and add 20 people to that thread and that thread. And got it, I think, to like by the end of the day, 100 people were interested, and we were like, okay, let's take this, you know, offline and do some email coordination. So yeah, I definitely think that the vision that I saw in my mind and heart was like, if I can just connect with one person who says that they're down for it. I am a type A personality and a perfectionist, and I was like, I'll do it all myself. I'll do it all myself, right? And I think, like you said, a lot of times, Evelyn, that can be, that mindset in and of it alone can be what stops us, right? Because you're like, I would do it all myself because that makes me feel more comfortable, and also it allows me to stay within that comfort zone, so I don't have to ask. I don't want to ask anybody to collaborate on a pattern. I certainly don't want to ask anyone to buy my patterns. And my goodness, talking about a whole event, like heck no. But when you just take a chance, like I have been hearing recently in different ways over and over, always bet on yourself. Always bet on yourself. You know, just take one chance, because, you know, a lot of content creators and influencers and people in our industry, this is something that is a beautiful commonality with so many of our stories through and through. It's like, I just took a chance on myself. And that may look like I quit my job and then I reached out to one brand and asked them for one content collaboration and it took off. Or I decided I was going to do one live, or I was going to do one blog post or one listing. And if you just, you know, and it's like, I was okay with it being yes or no, right? Because you got to be okay with that too. If it was a yes, it was a yes. If it was a not right now, or if it was a no, I was fully fine with all of that. And through and through and through, each designer, keynote speakers to events, people who have come to OML, that's the commonality. It's like, I bet on myself and I just took one leap, one small leap of faith, and it turned into something really great for my maker life. And that's definitely, and was, you know, the OML story for sure.
Yeah. So when you started OML, was it immediately the first event happened? What was that timeline like?
No, I want to say when we initially started like coordinating and talking to each other, it was in the colder months. And, you know, I personally, we had a lot of conversation about that. You know, we conversed of like, what does that look like? Because obviously knitwear, you know, you want to get cozy and cold, but also I know I completely hibernate for like 8 months out of the year in Chicago. So I was like, I don't know how people are going to feel about traveling. You know, I was like, travel season, if we're going to have this in various cities all around the world, travel season is in the warmer months. So,
Yep.
and also I feel personally more like I'm cool and hip and modern in the summertime.
Yeah.
So we had a lot of conversation about that. And we ultimately, you know, just landed on, yeah, let's do it in the summer, right? Like you can still be cool and casual and cozy, and you can at least talk about knitwear. You can talk about yarn, even if you're not wearing a full-on sweater. So let's do
Yep.
that. And this is not something, it's more definitely a micro retreat. So it's a
Mm-hmm.
1 day, 1 2 day sort of thing. So this is not something, you know, I've been to beautiful 4-day retreats in cabins in New Hampshire. And it's like, okay, for something like that, the environment, you know, would maybe make a little bit more sense. But yeah, we just ended up landing on, yeah, let's do it in the summertime. Let's do it in travel season where people are like, yeah, this is going to be my gift to myself. And yeah, so we ended up, you know, sort of working behind the scenes, I would say, for about half a year before we actually
Gotcha.
really got to event day. And, you know, I found a lot of lesson learned in that too, because sometimes we have ideas for things. I am so guilty of this. I have ideas for things and I'm like, I need to do that yesterday.
Yeah.
That pattern needs to be knit and be out right now.
Yep.
And so there was there was a lot of that. And even through, you know, the original founders and different coordinators coming onto the team with OML, it's been a constant, you know, give and get and push and pull and learning that lesson, right? Like I can have an idea for something, you may have an idea for something, but just because you have a great idea for something doesn't mean that that's a great idea right now.
Yeah.
You may need to do some thought, some organization and coordination into it. Like all the time, my happiest day is release day or event day.
Yeah.
But, you know, realizing all the things that come before that you really need to do, because that sometimes even gives you a formulation of like, maybe we shouldn't do it this way, or maybe we shouldn't do it at all, you know. And those type of conversations have certainly come up in OML and still come up in OML, you know, especially in how much the environment and the world has changed in the last 2 years. As a business owner, those are constantly decisions that I'm having to make.
Yeah. Well, so what was your academic focus in, and do you still use that side of things? Do you have a separate career where there's that, or have you just brought all of that in and our Maker Life and your business is full-time for you? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, it sounds, what I'm going to say probably sounds really esoteric, but I just feel like it's my story.
Yeah.
But when I was a little girl, I grew up in a really, really small town in South Carolina. And I always have had a love for writing, whether that be writing stories with my sisters or diarying or, you know, journaling or whatever. I've always loved writing. So I have always felt a calling and a purpose with that. Didn't necessarily know that that's something that could become a career. But what I did feel like that I had a vision and a calling on, I'm a very spiritual, esoteric sort of, you know, empath kind of person.
Yeah.
But I always just felt like my purpose in life was to communicate with the masses. Like that's just what I saw for myself, and I had to be about 10 years old. And I felt like I would connect with thousands of people in some way. But I'm literally at the time living in a town of maybe 1,000 people.
And like
I think
that's a really big vision for a 10-year-old. Can we talk about that for a second? Yes. I mean, that's kind of a weight on the shoulders in a way. I mean, was some of it like, was it a little overwhelming when you were younger, or were you just like, no big deal, I'm just going to do it?
Absolutely. And very overwhelming and just like, what?
Yeah.
That was mostly my response, like, huh? I live next to a cotton field right now, though. Like, so how am I going to get from A to B? That doesn't make any sense. And then also my experience of being around people also that, you know, it's life, but being around people that tell you you're dreaming too big, you know what I mean?
Yes.
I think it was definitely like a vision put on my heart, but also I've just always been a big dreamer and always wanted to be bigger than the environment that I was in. It's just not an environment I vibed with. And my mother is very much a big dreamer as well. And she was very encouraging of my sisters and I to dream big. But I didn't see her really living that tangibly herself. She's making a lot of sacrifices to raise
Yeah.
3 children as a single parent. So my thing was always like, I don't care what happens, I'm going to make my big dream happen. So
Yeah.
when I got into academia, I didn't really know it was a thing because my parents, I'm first generation college student, my parents did not go to college, so I didn't really know what it was all about. But lo and behold, there's a major called mass communications, and I was like, what? And
Yeah.
and it was like,
all the bells are going off.
yeah,
Right?
so it was tied with writing. You know, my teachers were just like, Jewel, you know, you can go to school for this. And so I immediately declared my major first week of school, never had a doubt about it.
Wow.
It was like, this is what I'm studying. I never changed my major. I studied it all 4 years. But even once I got immersed into journalism, definitely felt a calling there. I was like, because what else could it be? Like, this is mass comm. And I didn't, you know, I minored in business, but I never really foresaw myself being a business owner or anything like that. But yeah, I just always thought maybe there's something a little bit different or bigger. You know, I didn't know exactly what it looked like, but you know, news is very much its own very niche lane. Yeah. And I didn't necessarily feel that I was called to be a news reporter, which is really what I was studying. So journalism primarily through broadcast and different channels. And again, that's changed over probably the last decade. But I primarily really studied and leaned into political reporting, convergence reporting, which would be like news that you could do and put that out on various media platforms. And so, yeah, that's what I studied in school and ended up starting my career in. I eventually went on to graduate school to continue my journalism endeavors. I switched focuses a little bit from broadcast to print, specifically political print journalism and editing. And after I started graduate school, because again, I still sort of felt this press to do something. And as I saw social media start to grow, I knew, I was like, ooh, it's a culmination of that, because again, that's what I had been studying. Yep. My professors told us all the time, they're like, the way that news looks for you right now, girl, unfortunately ain't gonna look that way in 5 years. And it is directly connected with social media.
I knew it.
Technology. They knew. We were like, wait, what? Then why am I going to school for this?
Yes, why am I learning all of this?
They're like, good luck. So, you know, I really started to lean into that, but definitely, you know, wanted to obtain my master's first. But then, yeah, once I started Art Maker Life, I was very, you know, emphatic to my team, was like, it has to feel like this too, though. Because I just felt that's where the world was going, and you know, having online social mix into your business, I just felt like that was a pulse that we should touch on, and it also allowed us to use our talents. So Kelly has a strong broadcast journalism degree as well.
I didn't even realize that. I don't think she came on to one of the Pink Sheep and Friends, and I don't think we talked about that. I don't think we talked about her.
Bashful.
Yes.
Yes, Kelly has a strong broadcast journalism and photojournalism degree and background, as I do as well. Allison has business background experience. So yeah, it's definitely been an outlet for me to use my talents, where I get to, you know, feed my editing. You know, I can put my editing hat on and my writing hat, and doing that through blogging, and also just, I probably have about 10 years of experience as I was a local reporter. So that was literally me going out on the streets, and asking people about whatever and talking to people and becoming comfortable in front of a camera. So that's just really been my life. I did work in news a little bit for a few years in Chicago, and eventually made the leap over to where I do work full-time in marketing.
Gotcha.
But yeah, still obviously, you know, again, the world changed again a little bit, and really understanding your audience and how to market it and how it's important is something that, I've been able to utilize here for Art Maker Life as well.
Yes, that's amazing. I think it's so interesting. You touched on something that I wanted to mention and bring up, because I think it's so interesting. The generation gap, because when did you go to school? When were you in college?
Oh, school girl, 2008. So right when we got out, they're like, good luck, no jobs.
Yes. Yeah. So I graduated in 2010.
Okay.
So we're right around the same time.
Yeah.
And you said something that really stood out to me, which was, I never saw myself owning a business. I never saw myself being a small business owner. And I'm the same way. That wasn't even on the radar. Yeah. Like, because when we were going into college, the idea of owning a small business meant brick and mortar, you know, like you owned a brick and mortar, you probably owned some kind of service industry, something, or a franchise, or like, I didn't grow up knowing people that made a living working for themselves, doing something like, you know, there were a few people that were maybe starving artists, and I hate to say that, but that was really, there wasn't, you know, unless you were in wholesale to art studios, like starving artists were starving artists unless you like made a big break, you know. And I think that the generation now has so much empowerment, seeing so many people making a living, running their own businesses in so many ways. I mean, have you, I don't know if that's something that you've thought of a lot, but when you said it, it just made me think like, you're right. Like, I didn't see myself running my own business going into college.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. And my father, I told my father, I was like, I'm going to school for journalism and mass communications. And my professor said, I'll never make any money, but I'm going to do it anyways.
Yes.
And he was like, cool. The thing is though, like, he's like, at the minimum, just please minor in business. Just do that, because like, if you do end up needing some type of backup plan, one, you got that there, but two, it will also teach you how to do not only what it is that you're studying as your major, but when you get out in the real world, it will help you. And he was like, so just give me that much. And I was like, okay. But, you know, I still also, I'm sort of sometimes not as open to share this, but I'm sure it's probably your experience too, Evelyn, I have learned how to run a business by running a business. And I think that that has had its pros and its cons, because obviously like a lot of the lessons learned have like been in the midst of them happening. And those things have, you know, for better or worse, you know, sometimes felt hard. You know, learning how to be a team leader and delegate, how to make smart financial decisions for your businesses, all the way from accounting to deciding how you're going to do certain collaborations. You touched on a great point that I think I'm constantly learning and working with my team on, is like branding, you know, and me, I'm like, oh, I get it. I understand what OML is, but am I being able to explain it clearly and concisely enough that when somebody comes to the feed or sees in stories or goes to our website, that they understand what it is, and understanding like, girl, that's marketing, that's branding, that, you know, a continuation of business development, back of house and front of house. And you know, I think if you're able to learn those things in an academia environment or by some other hapstance, like maybe working a job or something like that, you're almost like light years ahead of the game. And, you know, if you do have that background, like, don't be afraid to like implement those things into your maker business, because I feel like most aspects of running a business through and through, it has been by experience. And that has made it, you know, in many ways, you know, it's provided me some great challenges, even with event planning, right? Because we were like, it took me a while to get to a comfortable place of saying, at its core, OML, like what we do is an event planning business. Like we do annual offline events, and that's sort of hard to say when people are like, well, what's your experience in event planning? And I'm like, OML. So, you know, just even, you know, understanding that like I didn't go to school for event planning. I don't have any other experience in event planning, but I've learned how to be a strong event planner by way of launching and running this business. And so,
trial by fire.
Absolutely. And I think it can be definitely something, I don't know if you felt this, but it has at times given me imposter syndrome. And even on the designer side, because being knitwear designers, like we're essentially running our own mom and pop businesses, you know. And if you don't have that piece of paper and whatever way to say that makes you credible, then you sort of will dim your light a little bit and maybe not even take the first step. But that was also a real core why I wanted to start our Maker Life as well, because, you know, I felt like a lot of us were holding back on that and holding back our magic and just telling ourselves like, well, that person who's doing over there, clearly they have some type of wealth of experience that I don't have.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can't do it, or because I don't know how to do it, or because I don't have the tools. And I thought, especially as a person of color, being BIPOC, that that was extremely important to be able to, like you said, be more bold and ambitious and put myself out in front of OML and say, I did start this.
Yep.
And I started this not having a lot of tools or understanding of how to do it. And so I understand, you know, if you're a maker out there who you sense that on any side of sort of all of the isms, you know, but to still, again, always bet on yourself and don't sell yourself short, especially in this day and age where it's like we can get access to information at the push of a button. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. I think running a business for sure, it's, you know, you have, like you said, you have a wealth of knowledge that's out there now, whether you're a book reader, there's so many books out there just on marketing and finance and like, but you have to continue learning. I mean, and some of it is, like you said, some of it's just learning as you go. I mean, we make mistakes, we learn from those mistakes. Hopefully we learn from those mistakes so that we can keep going in the right direction. Mm-hmm. But like, I'm one who I love buying books on Amazon and like taking time to like read some of these kind of business marketing, you know, the basics, like the super basics, getting down to basics, and then learning how to like, you know, apply that to what we're dealing with now with social media and all of that. Mm-hmm. And being a small business, a lot of the business books really focus on this idea of starting corporations or starting, like, you're going to have staff members, you're going to have a team, like, but you can still take that information and put it to work for your customers, even if it's just you know, like learning, you know, how to have good customer service and how to create relationships with the people that are supporting you. But I think too, I just totally lost my train of thought.
No, that I love what you're saying. I tell you, I would love if Laura was watching this playback. If you are Laura, who is the founder of Jimmy Bean's Wool, hey, but if she's watching, but Laura sort of said that to me when I had the opportunity to converse with her. She said, Jewell, one of the things that I always do, that I've always been doing, and it is 100%, you know, so closely tied to her success of Jimmy Bean's Wool, is she is constantly learning. She is constantly reading books around business, how to run business. And she said, my jam really too is like, I don't always even read, you know, books that are so closely tied to our industry. She's like, I specifically like to read about business owners that like how they launched their pizza franchise or something like, you know, just something so off the wall, because there are elements there that I can, like, she can make that separation. And then figure out like really inherently, like, how do I apply this to my business? So yeah, the book that I'm reading right now, because like you said, I've sometimes I continue to go around hurdles in my business. I'm like, didn't I already learn this lesson? Why am I back here again? Like, what is happening? Is it me? I think it's me. But I think also that I've had to accept, like, girl, this is the advent of running a business. But you know, in the book Alchemy that I'm reading, one of the businesses and brands that they talk about, that's a great example of the overall point of the book that they're talking about as far as tied to business success, is Red Bull. That Red Bull, you know, formulated their business sort of completely in this very non-logical, you know, aspect. They're like, how do we sell a multi-million-dollar brand business? Let's make it the nastiest drink ever. Versus like, that is so not logical. Like, why would you do that? But once you, like, I was learning about their brand, I was like, oh my gosh, they did that like purposely. At least that was the feedback that they got from their focus groups, that like it didn't taste good at all, and they were like, we could use this. So you know, like things like that, and you know, the point of it through and through, they give countless examples in the book, but it's just like, how can you implement that in your business and brand? What does that look like? And so I've been able to talk with other makers in the community where we talked about that. I'm reading this book with Fiber Business Collective, run by Anastasia Williams, who is a maker here in the community. And what we were talking about, we were like, okay, what would that look like for knitwear? And one person said, well, you know, there's so much pressure that we put on ourselves to release patterns constantly. It's like you drop one pattern, you can never go back to it. You can't release that pattern in multiple colors. It's like, maybe if you get a month worth of time from one pattern to another, right? And sort of thinking intuitively, like, why do we do that? Why do we do that? Is it because what the market calls for? Is it what brands and businesses are calling for on designers? Like, why do we do that? And we talked about that, and then someone said, what would it look like if you released one pattern and only marketed and branded that one pattern for an entire year? What would it look like? And would you release it in different colors? Would you showcase it in different lifestyle? Like, just having a complete brainstorm session of what that would look like, and how refreshing would it be for you as a designer? Could you find more inspiration and creativity as a designer if you did that? Could you potentially make more money, more profit? And so it's things like that that I just find so cool. And you really don't really get to those points unless you're constantly reading things on, on the business side of things, of seeing how other brands and businesses, very successful ones, are not so successful ones, how they're doing it. So I totally hear you there.
Well, and I'm actually taking notes right now. This is so good.
Oh yeah. I don't know why the author of Alchemy is escaping me, but maybe we can.
If you'll send me, if you'll send me the Alchemy book, the Fiber Business Collective information, because I would love to shout her out. Then I think what's really interesting about that is not only continuing to learn, but you hit on something else. It's having a sounding board with other people. That's another reason why community comes in so heavily, is finding, and I talk about this all the time with my smaller communities, of finding the niche within a niche. So like finding your people within the greater community. And I think like Facebook community groups I feel like that's like the one thing that's hanging on with Facebook, are the groups, because they can be really, really wonderful places for people. Discord servers, like there's a lot of really great Discord groups that people can join, where they can find that niche of a space, whether it's I really want to focus on business. Like, is there a group for me where I can talk to other people who have similar businesses and have a sounding board? Like, I have this idea and I'm just sitting on it. And if I tell my partner, if I tell my mom, of course they're going to be like, that's a great idea, honey. But like, you might really want someone to be like, let me play devil's advocate for a minute, And I think that that's a huge part of continuing to stay consistent and continuing to grow your business, is having people that you can also get advice from and mentoring. And, even if it's not mentoring people on the same level as you, having ideas together. And that's why I think collaborations are so great, because, you might find someone who's kind of in the same space as you are with where they're at in their business and the milestones that they've hit. And I remember where I was going with it before, when we were talking about imposter syndrome, of how long it took me to be willing to not only call myself a crochet designer, but to actually put that in my title on Instagram.
Wow.
I mean, I was like, how many patterns does it take? Do I have enough? Like, can I call myself a designer? Wow. And it probably took at least a year for me to feel like confident enough to like call myself a designer.
Yeah. Wow. I totally like, wow, I'm glad that you shared that, because I would say when I saw your page, months and months, maybe years ago now, but I saw your page.
It's been a while. I know.
Yeah. When I would always look at your page, I would always think, she is so super extra confident. I was just like, I love your energy. I was just, and that's, like you said, the beautiful thing about connection and collaboration, right? Because we make these assumptions about people, right or wrong, because you are confident, you are bubbly, and I do love your energy and I love your vibrancy. But if I'm being honest, I would just be like, oh, she's super, super happy, yay! And you know, and to just, like you said, the beautiful thing about community, and I've really had, some continuous deep conversation with people in all generations to say, like, okay, essentially the youngest generation right now of adults is Gen Z, right? And so like, what's important to Gen Z? And I think definitely like what you're saying as far as community and collaboration is regarded, it's really in an online aspect. Like you said, they've got their, we've got our Discords, we've got our Slacks, Facebook community is holding on, people have like TikTok, but I think Generation Z is doing a wonderful way I think really in much in part often started by millennials in our generation, but really being able to utilize technology and social. Yeah, I'm always like, millennials walk so Gen Z can run. But I love Gen Z because sometimes I know millennials and they're like, I'm like, you're getting a little crabby, you're being a little bit of a hater, but like give Gen Z their credit for where they've taken it to the next level, right? But I also, and I say that because I think, like you said, where like the confidence can come in of whether you're a designer, but specifically like, okay, well, how do I fit in community here, right? Like, what does that look like in an ever-changing environment? Because I actually went to an in-person conference last year. Their event is getting ready to happen on June 21st and 22nd of this year. It's HH Americas, if any of you all have ever heard of it. But, a large part of the audience of HH is, I'm not embracing modern technology, whatever that looks like. I'll give you Ravelry. I'm not giving you anything else. And, so there was a lot of conversation that, I was able to foster and be a part of, and being like, hey, like technology, I'm probably going to bet on it's not going anywhere. Social online communities, I don't think it's going anywhere for a long time. And not only is it not going anywhere, but increasingly younger generations are figuring out, like you said, those micro communities. They may not necessarily know, or desire or understand why an OML is important, when I can have my pink sheet community, right? Like I can have my followers and create that community right there. So why would I need OML? But I think what the important part of it is that constantly I'm reminded of, and that gives me confidence of, like, you need that in person too. You need that in person, because I think you'll be able to be more genuine with yourself on having that sounding board. When we have the OML events, the realness and rawness before, during, and after, at the after party and the after party, makers can get really, really real. Real, you know what I mean? And you always want to still foster safe spaces, but I think this sort of came up too a lot with, like, not even a generational thing, but sometimes heavier topics that definitely happen online. I think there can be like a lot of fear, a lot of imposter syndrome, a lot of assumptions, a lot of finger pointing, a lot of fear mongering on heavy topics. And, I'm not saying, because I am not the creator, an omnipresent creator of that, but of events, but like when you get offline and you go to in-person events, that could be a micro retreat like OML, a 4-day retreat in New Hampshire, a Jimmy Bean's 5-day retreat in Nevada, an H&H 2-day retreat, conference in Rosemont, wherever you go. Something about the in-person dynamic allows you to take off that mask, take off that filter. You don't have to show yourself in 7 to 15 seconds. And you can share some real in-depth things about yourself, whether that's you asking questions about your business, whether that's, it took me a year, y'all, to put that I was a crochet designer in my bio, like, none of us have really like academic business experience. That's cool. We're learning by example. Or like, what do you know? Or what have you learned? It's just that type of fostering is magical. It's magical to me. And I think it's something that I, in some facet, will always want to do, because I always have done that. I've always felt that magic. And I think it's really inspiring as, I get older, and as generations, continue to become leaders in how we create and foster our world, that is a constant. That's even when it was those mom and pop brick and mortars, this is what they were doing. This is what they were doing. And it's just beautiful. It's beautiful to see, but I also love to challenge people through and through and through of like, I don't think, the internet is capable of taking you as far as you would want to. You need that additional aspect of your business. And you not only need it for your business or your brand, but you need it for you. You need it for you, because I also talk to a lot of people of that, like us younger generations, we often, because we were talking about demographics of retreats, right? Like, what does that age look like? And for a lot of the retreats, people don't really feel like they can give themselves permission for various reasons, whether that be finances or time, to go on retreats and offline events and conferences, maybe over into their later years. And it's like, why do we as young people feel like it's always about the hustle, work, and we don't give ourselves permission to be like, Well, I can just go and talk about why I love it, right? And it's not about me creating content. It's not about me making a profit. I just want to lean into this with fellow like-minded individuals, because we all love to do it. Like, that's okay. And I understand that that is inherently going to make me feel stronger, happier, more confident, you know, whatever, once I leave here, right? Like, people have told me that they had a lack of a spark that they may not have even realized that they had before they go to OML, and after. And we're talking about a one-day micro retreat. They have a spark. They have a spark to be like, I started my business. I released that pattern. I sent that email for that collaboration. I, you know, told that maker, like, I love you. I finally commented on their page, or I did a reel, or I signed up for another retreat, or I signed up for a business collective. All of these things. And it's like, wow, that is so cool. You know, that you're able to get that from offline retreats. But also, it's just like, also, I gave myself permission to enjoy it for the love of it too. And you know, it's really why I also started OML. I wanted people to be reminded, like, you can do this just because you love it, because I didn't start knitting and crochet to make a profit. That's just not my story.
Most people don't.
Most people don't. But you go online and you would maybe assume otherwise, right? Because it's like you're creating content, and it's like, sign up for my newsletter, buy my like, it's all very like, well, it seems like you want to, like, you do it for a business, like maybe you started it for a business, you know what I mean? And I think as our world becomes more genuine, and we're just really share more content just because we love it, and that content be us, who we are, I think it continues to also equally highlight the importance of doing that offline, because you can do it just because you love it. You can right now, no matter how you're running your business, but you deserve that, and give yourself permission to do that. And I've been doing OML since 2016 because I want to remind myself and fellow makers like yourself, other leaders in the industry like yourself, to be reminded that you deserve that as well, to do it just because you love it.
I actually had someone on here, and her name, of course, is escaping me now, but she is someone who actually had imposter syndrome for the opposite reason of what you'd think. And it was because, you know, she shares content on Instagram very, very regularly, but doesn't actually sell anything, like just wants to share about her love of crochet, be able to be her goofy self in reels. And like, you know, there are times where she's like, you know, maybe I don't have a real reason for like doing this. I mean, it takes up a lot of my time, but like, she has a job that she loves that's not related to the fiber art world, and was like, I just want to share this. And she was like, but I went to a retreat that was kind of for business people who were trying to run a crochet business. And she was like, I kind of felt like an imposter, you know, and I love that you said it's okay to do either. Like, you should feel empowered and positive about your experience, whether you're making a little money, you know, whether you never really want to make any money doing it, whether you want to make a full-time job doing it. It's giving yourself that grace to be like, okay, this is where I'm happy, and it's okay. Like, that's, and I can share that. And I think for me, I always like to remind people that you're going to attract the energy that you put out is going to attract the right people. So like, if you're enjoying posting about things that you create, even if you're not trying to sell anything, you're going to attract the people that want to see more of that content. So, you know, I think it's so important to not spend all of this time creating content to, you know, that you think other people want to see. Like, you got to do it for you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's been a challenge. My brand manager, she challenges me all the time, because she's like, okay, Jewel, give it to me in 5 sentences. What is a person who goes to OML? What are they going to get? Or 5 words in 1 sentence, 5 words. And I'm like, well, they're going to get, you know, a chance to meet up with friends and also business and all. And she's like, no. She's like, no, you know, but it's so I say that like another thing that I'm learning as a business, right? Of just kind of like fine tuning it and nailing it down. But that is one of the cool things that I do think you get from OML. You do get this chance for, you know, on a micro level with one day, it's all we got. We got to kick off on Friday, and then you get Saturday, to, yeah, meet up with like-minded individuals, and hang out in whatever way you see fit for a weekend. But also, yeah, there's this business aspect angle of it too. Like Tony Lipsy was our keynote speaker for Portland, and we were like taking notes, you know,
Yes.
like she was giving so
Yes.
much great, valuable business gems. So yeah, I can understand and I relate to the fact, you know, as a designer myself, you know, because I didn't start North Knits at all to make a profit. And, you know, for a while, it was just like, yeah, do I really want to, you know, do this as a way to make money? I really started North Knits in grad school. I was knitting for people, you know, my college mates and
Yes.
our school colors. And then I was handing it out on the streets of
Mhm.
Chicago because it is freezing here. And the level of homelessness is heartbreaking, you
Yes.
know, it's
Yep.
heartbreaking. And I had not ever seen that. I come from very warm South Carolina. So I was like,
Yep.
I'm literally going to use my skills of knitting to give it to people who it can really benefit, because like that's the least that I could try and do. And you know, I equally battle with that, and I think so many of us battle with that, especially if we hit burnout or we're not seeing
Yep.
the payoff and the results. Because I've run into that of like, okay, I made the leap to want to do it for profit, but I don't necessarily get the signups or the money or the digital download sales that I want to get. And so then like, what does that look and feel like? You know, should I just be like, whatever, I knit this and I love it and I hope you like it too, or not?
Yes. Yes.
But, you know, yeah, I definitely think it comes to a lot of fine tuning and realizing like, number one, too, that can always constantly be ever evolving and changing. But, you know, for today, if where you land on is that like, it's just not giving, that I don't really want that for profit. Like, that's okay. And maybe a result could, you know, because maybe that's where the imposterness is coming from. Like maybe makers may be doing it and they're not yielding the profit, but there is some type of result that they still want, that they need to like feel good about. So maybe that's newsletter signups. Maybe that's getting a certain amount of people in your Facebook community. Maybe that's people watching your reels. So really being okay with like figuring out like what that is, and then reaching, you know, working to reach those goals. But even once you reach those milestones, like really being okay with them, which is constantly hard to do, because once you reach one milestone, then you set another.
Exactly. So there is still space at the upcoming event, yes?
There are still seats available, yes.
Okay,
Absolutely.
awesome. And I would love if you, before we run out of time, what makes this event different from other, because like you said, there are other crochet and knitting style events. What makes OML different, and what can people expect this year if they decide to join you guys in Denver?
Yes. Well, I would say, yes, there are still seats available. And I don't know if I said this on the live earlier, but the event is going to be on July 22nd in Denver, Colorado. We're going to be meeting up at a beautiful venue in downtown Denver called Skylight. And we have some wonderful keynote speakers, that being Jessica of Mama in a Stitch, who is a longtime crochet and knitwear designer, as well as Chiwe of One Dog Wolf. So they're going to be our keynotes, but we're also going to have some really cool influencers here in the industry. Ceci of Ceci Knits the World, Alexa of Alexandria, well, I call her Alexi of Two of Wands. And also some other wonderful makers that we're hoping to have come on soon. I would say what you do get from our Maker Life that you may not get from other events is, number one, it's a micro retreat style. So you're getting 24 hours. We are looking to have a knit night, like a Friday kickoff knit night with a local yarn shop in Denver. But ultimately our event will be from 12 to 8 p.m. They're always 8-hour events, but we're doing it a little different from day to night this year. So our event will be kicking off at noon and running until 8 p.m. And so you will be able to get a lot of immersion with fellow makers in the industry, information, knowledge, networking, because we'll have like, and yarn buying. We're having an OML marketplace this year. But mostly what makes OML a little bit different is that we're just talking about knit and crochet. It's not about you walking away with tools so that you can go and be like a rock star profit making machine business person.
It's not a business.
Yeah.
It's not like a business conference.
Not a business conference. It is a micro retreat where you can meet up with fellow like-minded makers and individuals to talk about the love for knit and crochet. And so I know the buzzword you know, these days is community, but that is our community, and it is about community. There are those subtexts that you will be able to get. You will be able to squish yarn and buy yarn, and you know, the keynotes will be touching on obviously sharing their business design journey. But yeah, it's a micro retreat to meet up to talk about knit and crochet. And I found that in running OML since 2016, it's a constant important in our industry, and what people need and what they want. So I would love to see you all there, and you can click the link in our bio to go to our page. We have our whole event page where you can find out all the details.
And you mentioned too that you will probably have some panels. So when you do the panel discussions, is it just different topics, like you said, anything from business to community to, what does that look like?
Yes, our panel discussions have always been open audience Q&A. So makers have a chance to submit leading up to the event, but really the day of, you can actually submit anonymous questions there at the event. Cool. You can cater it towards specific panelists, which we'll, you know, share who those actual panelists are going to be soon on our website. But yeah, it's really audience led and driven. We do sort of like to sometimes foster those questions depending on who the, you know, the keynotes and the speakers are, and really what they talk about around their keynotes. So for example, for our Portland event, a lot of that conversation was really centered around business. That's just kind of where it went. But you know, in different conversations around being a business owner, wherein in Calgary, that conversation for the panel discussion was around diversity and inclusion and how to be anti-racist and what that looks like. And those were the questions that makers asked anonymously, directed at certain, you know, speakers there who were talking. And so, yeah, it's very audience led for sure.
Awesome. I love that. And I like the fact that it shows that the discussion is going to change with the times, because it is open-ended. So if there are big events happening in the world, you know that's going to come in to the event. And like you said, having some difficult conversations at times, but allowing people to have those conversations in person, connecting over those conversations. And I wanted to mention too, we talked a lot about generational differences. I think that part of the reason that, you know, you have this push for in-person is the same reason that I would, is because, you know, that millennial generation had kind of the best of both worlds. Like, we grew up with the in-person, didn't really get the social media until college heavily. And I think I sometimes fear for the youngest generation, because I don't want them to miss out on the in-person. And I think that's why it's so important for organizations like OML to continue to push the in-person events, to make sure that people don't lose that part of community and life in having everything happening online. And I think they crave it. I think it's like craving it without even realizing what you're craving, because they don't have as much of those abilities to get together, you know, whether that's with the pandemic and people moving to online school and already being on social media so much. And then, you know, graduating college in the middle of the pandemic. And then, like, what do I do with my life? Everything's online. And so I think pushing that importance, to me, is extremely important for future generations, to remember how important it is to have those real in-person IRL.
Real. You need both, Gen Z.
Yes. Well, thank you.
Absolutely. Yes. And I wholeheartedly agree. And thank you so much. I received that because, you know, a lot of times that has been challenging, right? Just through the pandemic, and really, you know, already seeing and feeling the trajectory of the world going that way, and then to really sort of in many ways being forced to do that. And so, like I said, I can really empathize with Gen Z of just all the different aspects of that they've really, you know, had to face